guest today is Julius Solaris. He's the head of engagement at Swapcard. He's also an event expert. Julius, welcome to our show today.
Thanks for having me, Christopher. Such a pleasure.
So the best advertisement or the best referral is when one of my guests, who's an event planner for over 20, 30 years, she's like, you got to talk to this guy. And again, you can hear the excitement in her voice. And what she most loved about you, Julius, was that you're just super blunt and straightforward and authentic. Because we are in the event space where I am a keynote speaker and you are an executive, and you just essentially have worked in the event space for quite some time. And when she said that as an experienced event planner, I'm like, all right, let's see who this guy is. And especially since you're in the virtual world, I was very excited to talk to you because we do have a lot of guests who are speakers, experts, entrepreneurs, and executives who want to learn from you. So I'm just curious, let's talk about your backstory. First of all, how did you even get into the event space? It's not something that we dream about, perhaps, or maybe you did, right? Maybe you're 7 years old.
Yeah, that's a great question. I started pretty early, when I was out with my friends planning parties and stuff like that, on an entrepreneurial level. And then it happened that my first gig out of university was, something to do with conferences and the business of events, as we call it. So not necessarily the long tail of weddings and sporting events, but more like conferences, trade shows, especially in the pharmaceutical industry. And I worked in that sector as my first gig out of university. And then I moved to Sydney, Australia for a couple of years to do my MBA there. And this was 2004, 2005. And blogs were the big thing right then, right? There were the podcasts and the TikToks of now to a certain extent. If you wanted to be an influencer, you had to have a blog. And therefore I wanted to start a blog. I thought that my career was, having a blog, and the only topic I could talk about, my experience back then, were events. And I was fascinated specifically by the intersection of social media rising and, the use of social networks such as Twitter and LinkedIn and the likes at events. So how would the two things interact? How would technology eventually impact events? So I was very fascinated by that intersection. I was one of the first in the industry to talk about it very vocally. And I started this blog called EventMB, which is a short for Event Manager blog. And that started in 2007. It's been a 14 years old sort of journey that brought me to London and then eventually to the US, where I'm based right now. In 2019, I sold the business to Skift, one of the largest travel media companies out there. And as of 2 weeks ago, I left that job to be part of Swapcard, my next gig, and in the virtual event space specifically. So that's kind of a sum up of my last 15 years.
Well, Julius, let's talk about the EventMB, because a lot of people want to build a following. And what Sharon, who referred me to you, mentioned that you have built this very large following. So how did you do that? Because I think you have thousands of people on some of your virtual events. How do you go about attracting so many people?
Sure. Just to give you some reference into, we're talking about a B2B environment. And so the numbers are not as crazy as a food blogger or anything like that. But they're still sort of 10, 15 times more than our competitor in the industry. So we built a following, readership of 350,000 event planners a month. We built a group on LinkedIn of 400,000 members. We did events last year for 50,000 attendees. So you have to think that the biggest trade show in the event industry has 10,000 attendees. Half of those are suppliers. We had 50,000 of those, and all meeting and event planners participate in our events. How did we get there? I've been dedicated to content from the get-go. I've been dedicated to cut the crap in terms of, all the noise that is made and all the sort of press releases that were, masked as content, and dedicated myself to finding answers to the questions that planners had, especially when it got to technology. We're very niche and specific into creating clarity. Think back in 2008, 2009, when we started to have mobile apps built for events, we were the first to create reports about what the market looked like and what event planners could do to choose the best app, and do research about it and create a lot of insights and data around it. Through the years, we created multiple of those opportunities, and we grew our reputation. The secret sauce there was resilience, I think. The only differentiator between myself and my competitors that started with me in 2007 is that they quit, they gave up, and I kept on going.
And the timing was great. Well, first of all, I want to just let all our listeners and guests know that the event space is a $300 billion space. And these event planners, they have such impact where, let's say I spoke at AIM last year, as one of the leading trade events in all of Asia Pacific. And when you meet people in Australia or the UK or the Middle East, there's so many people. And what I love about being a keynote speaker is that when I work with people like yourself or event planners, we get to inspire the world, not just figuratively, but factually. So I'm curious for you, what do you most enjoy about being in the event space? And then we'll pivot and talk about what you do now, because again, this whole head of engagement, super impressed with this Evolve Summit that I was on that you graciously invited me to. But I'm curious, I really always hope that people like what they do. It's not always the case, but if you've been in this game for quite some time, what is something that you really enjoy about the event space?
That's a question that has become much easier to answer since the pandemic started. I think that we all now really value and understand what the value of meeting in person is and connecting with other individuals. When I check my Facebook stream, and I checked it over the holidays, for example, which was probably one of the darkest moments of the pandemic for a lot of Western countries, at least. I could only see pictures from previous events where people attended events and connected with others. Probably wasn't over a boring conference, but it was over the networking. It was over the party that they had, a specific event, and that need to connect with other individuals, that serendipity. A lot of us can share the same story of having met a business partner. It's funny enough, I can tell you a story about that. I was in an event at IMEX, one of the largest trade shows in the event industry in Vegas. I was at a networking event, and a friend introduced me to an editor at Skift, the company that eventually acquired us. So he introduced me to him. He introduced me to their CEO. Their CEO bought our company, and when I left the company 2 weeks ago, the very person that introduced me to the editor to begin with is now the editor-in-chief of EventMB, in which I left. So you see how just a random introduction and event changed the life of 4 different people and 2 different companies. So if you multiply that effect from the millions of events happening every year, you immediately see the value of connection. And that's the important part, connection, whether it happens in person or virtual for now, then back to in person with some hybrid component. We can talk about that forever. But the job that event professionals have, it's one of connecting people. And it's probably one of the most important jobs that we have right now, especially after the pandemic.
Yeah. And you bring up a point, because I wrote a book about networking, and networking actually is a science, and it's divided into closed networks and open networks, and which is why event spaces are so inspiring, where I still remember I was in Saudi Arabia and we took a picture with people that were there. One guy was English, I'm American, another guy's from India. But it was one of those moments where we would never have been in Saudi Arabia together, from different cultures, ethnicities, and those moments are lifelong. So I encourage all of us to be mindful of that. And even though we're in this current state of mind, when they say, oh, we're not going back to the events, people forget we're human beings. And human beings is about connecting. So I'm curious, let's talk about Evolve and just your role in Swapcard, because this whole virtual space, this is just low tech relative to 2 screens on a Zoom. But I was on your platform, Evolve, and I was very impressed with just the interactivity, how many things are going on, that you can pick and choose different things, and really how do you network and connect with people there. So I'm curious, tell us about this virtual world we're in now.
Absolutely. So I joined a company 2 weeks ago called Swapcard.com. You can check it out. What Swapcard does is we offer a virtual event platform, what we call a platform. So it's an evolution of your Zoom call, right? In an environment that resembles what happens in an event and what you would expect to happen in an event. But important to make a differentiation here, does not mimic that and try to replicate the same experience, but rather creates a much nicer virtual optimized experience in terms of what the virtual events needs are, which are completely different from an in-person event. You can picture a keynote speaker, right, going on for an hour at a live session. That's not going to happen online. 20 minutes is more than enough, right? So there's a lot of different consideration in terms of the user experience. So we come from live events as a company. We used to be a mobile app for events. Swapcard, as in let's swap our business cards digitally, right? But then pivoted in March and had this incredible growth. Some of the biggest events like South by Southwest uses Swapcard, is going to use Swapcard next week. The Dubai World Exhibition is going to use Swapcard.
Oh, I might be speaking there. Yeah, that's in, I think, November, October.
Exactly.
It's with the Economists and the Dubai
Correct.
Chamber of Commerce, right? Yeah.
Yes. IBM, Oracle, Black Hat, all these huge conferences and events, especially large ones, use us. Going back to Evolve. Evolve is one of our biggest initiatives to engage with our community, where we've created an event for event professionals. So for those that work in the event industry in different capacities, as suppliers, as speakers, as planners. And, we offered our platform for them to, experience the best possible content for the world's top experts in our industry and outside our industry. Our keynote speaker was Duncan Wardle, head of innovation for Disney for many years. And, we gave it away to 10,000 event professionals that participated in that event. And we're extending that concept also to a concept of community, which is the next step that we expect from virtual events. Meaning, yes, the event is great, but what happens after that? And do I need to come back to every different event each time? No, we're translating that into a 365-day community where you have your events, whether they're virtual, in person, hybrid, you have a webinar, you have a piece of content, a podcast that you can publish there. So this is what our vision for the future, I guess, of virtual.
Yeah. And Julius, it's really great because, like I said, I attend so many events and I'm on these virtual events as well. But what I loved about it, just to give the people an analogy, if Zoom is kindergarten, your event is like a PhD, only because there's so many things going on where I went through some of the things. And so you have some of the keynote speeches, you have the scheduling, but it's very thorough and it's very interactive. So for the people that want to learn more, definitely check out Julius, what he does and Evolve. What's one thing you perhaps might want to leave us with, Julius? So let's say right now we're in March of 2021. In Australia, I spoke to one of the bureaus there. 78% of their events right now are in person. The vaccine's already out. So we're already moving to a much better place for all of us. But this whole virtual thing and hybrid, I think it'll really be a new model. So I'm curious, given that you've been in this space for quite some time, where do you see, let's say, the next 1 to 3 years that's more hopeful for the people in the event industry? Because it really is about what you said before, connection, that community. Because without that, we're not human beings, we're just robots.
Absolutely. Virtual events didn't start in March 2020. Virtual events have been around before then, right? But we cannot delete from our memory this collective massive experience that we had over the past year of attending 1 million virtual events. We really had a quantum leap in terms of our experience and progression and understanding of the tools and the experience that we want, to the stage where many companies, many corporate environments will rethink a lot of their meetings that were unnecessary. A lot of events, it's tough to say, but were not necessary. People didn't need to travel that long for a one-day meeting and just come back to the office, leaving the family with all the stress. So we know that virtual events, offer a great opportunity to replace a lot of those meetings that were not necessary. They also are our biggest means of inclusion for people that cannot be there. And there's always going to be people that cannot attend for whatever reason. They're also a great way to cut on carbon emissions and sustainability. These are big topics that probably we're not thinking about it right now, but in 2 years' time, we're going to start thinking about it again. So, the whole movement of flight shaming people that take unnecessary flights. Virtual events are a fantastic replacement for that, for unnecessary travel. And then, the future is going to be hybrid. That's how we call it. So a mixture of the virtual environment, the in-person environment, probably with two separate experiences that sometimes get together. Sometimes you'll be able to meet someone that is attending in person through the app, but then everybody's going in that direction. They're having their own experience. So that's where I see the future going for sure.
That's awesome, Julius. Thank you so much for being on our show today. How can our guests learn from you and stay in touch to learn more about Swapcard and other things you're working on?
Absolutely. So as head of engagement from Swapcard, you have direct access to the best of the best in terms of showing you things around. Julius@swapcard.com, very easy, or @Julius, TOJULIUS, everywhere on social networks. Just get in touch with me, and I'd love to discuss events with you, or Swapcard if you want to, but I'm a sucker for a good conversation. So whatever you want to reach out for, feel free to.
Julius, thanks so much for being on our show. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me.